In February of 2025, ProPublica reported that the General Services Administration hired a new senior advisor who had been up to some dubious practices, something the IRS called the worst of the worst tax scams. What is the scam? Well, that's what this video is all about. Today we're talking about something called syndicated conservation easements, and boy, does that sound dull. But I did a whole episode for this on the Truce podcast, and it is fascinating. Let's start with the simple stuff. What is a conservation easement? It's a program that was designed to give tax relief to people like farmers. And what you do is give up certain rights to your property, stuff like how much you can develop it or what you can do with the land. In exchange, you get a tax write-off for preserving the land. Sounds nice, right? Keep the farm in the family. To be clear, even though this sounds like something to preserve the land for animals and recreation, it is not. For example, in Jackson, Wyoming, there is a private golf course that uses conservation easements, and they literally have a guy on staff whose job it is to scare animals off the greens. So it's not a wildlife preserve. Rich people get a tax write-off, and the animals have to stare at acres of green grass that they can't eat. Unless, I guess, they can afford a membership. Also, it doesn't stop them from using pesticides or messing with the habitat. And even though the taxpayers are funding this, the land is still private. You and I can't camp or hike on it or even play golf. The problem is, these programs aren't open to most of us. When I did a story for this on the Truce podcast in season 4, I used this example. One of my friends owns her own home, and this is not it. This is just a stock photo. She uses a program that helps working people lower their taxes. In 2020, she paid $1,732 in property taxes. Now, just a few miles away lives one of the most famous actors in the US. That year, for about 47 acres of land, he paid $712.43. He owns 367 times the amount of land that she does. Yet, he paid less than half of what she paid in property tax. Even though she's on a government program designed to help working people, she paid more than double what one of the highest grossing actors in US history paid, even though he owns almost 400 times the amount of land. That's where conservation easements get sticky. Rich people use this thing that was designed to help farmers and turn it into a tax break that you and I likely can't take advantage of. Let's come back to the present and that scam we talked about earlier. What this guy at the GSA and his firm did was buy cheap land. They then paid for a private property valuation that inflated the value of the land and sold stakes to wealthy people. Some of them ended up getting a tax break that was worth twice what they paid for their share. So they got a fraudulent tax break and ownership in a hunk of land that they could then sell for profit. The plan was eventually halted and is under investigation, but this guy is now working for the US government at the GSA. Oh, and what does the GSA do? It manages government property and land. Kind of a conflict of interest. You should definitely read this article on ProPublica's website. And if you want to learn more about conservation easements, check out season 4 of the Truce podcast. Now, in season 6, I'm talking about the connection between some evangelicals and the Republican Party and how that came together in the 1970s and 80s. I'd love for you to check it out. You can get Truce anywhere you find your podcasts or listen at trucepodcast.com.